Sister excluded my son and me from dinner. You'd have called ahead, her husband mocked. Minutes later, we're enjoying a VIP meal while they're the ones staring over jealous. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to have your own family slam a door in your face with a smile, I can tell you. It starts with a text that looks harmless. Family dinner for Lily's birthday. Nothing too fancy, just dress nice. It continues with you buying a shirt you can't really afford so no one whispers that you look sloppy. Again, and it ends with your 12-year-old son standing behind you in a glass-walled private room, staring at a table that has a printed place card for everyone except the two of you. My name is Ryan, and for 39 years I've been the brother who lets things go. That night I didn't. People like my sister don't just wake up one day and decide to pull the chair out from under you. They get trained for it. And people like me, we get trained to laugh it off. Growing up, Melissa was our little superstar. Straight A's, homecoming queen, cheer captain, the whole shiny package. Every fridge magnet, every family photo, every conversation somehow circled back to her. Did you see Melissa's science project? Your sister just got another A. Isn't that amazing? Meanwhile, I was the kid in the corner with a sketchbook and ink, stained fingers. I didn't hate sports, I just didn't care. I liked drawing video games and reading books that didn't come with a grade attached. Ryan's creative, Mom would say when relatives asked what I was into, her voice tilting on the word like it was a problem. We're hoping he grows out of it. The double standard started small. When Melissa backed Dad's car into the mailbox at 17, Mom rushed outside, hands on her heart. Oh honey, are you okay? You must be so stressed with exams. No wonder you weren't focused. When I scraped a stranger's bumper in college, Dad's old set-in, no one even asked if I was all right. Do you ever think before you act? Mom snapped over the phone. You're almost 20, Ryan. This is embarrassing. Melissa's mistakes were symptoms. Mine were character flaws. Hers meant she was overwhelmed. Mine meant I was irresponsible. The only person who seemed to see both of us clearly was Dad. Robert wasn't perfect. He could be blunt, gruff even. But he never made me feel like I was some defective version of her. One night, when I was 16, I found him out on the back porch, nursing a beer and staring at the dark yard. I'd just been chewed out for moping at dinner because Melissa was talking about prom, and I dared to look less than thrilled. I slid the screen door open. Mom mad at me again. She's not mad, he said. She's loud. He patted the step beside him. Sit. I sat. He didn't talk for a minute, just listened to the crickets. You're not weak because you don't like to fight, he finally said. You hear me? I shrugged. Kinda feels like it? He shook his head. No, you pick your battles. That's smart. Just make sure you're not picking none. Don't disappear just because your sister takes up a lot of space. At 16, I thought he was being dramatic. At 39, I can see he was begging me not to turn into exactly who I became. When he died, everything tilted. Whatever fragile balance he'd kept between Melissa and me vanished overnight. At the funeral, people lined up to hug Mom, to hug Melissa. You have to stay strong for your mother now, one of Dad's friends told me, squeezing my shoulder. You and your sister. But the way the family spoke, it was clear who they expected to actually hold it together. Melissa, the capable one. I was the quiet extra, the spare tire everyone was glad to have but hoped they'd never need. After Dad, every holiday became Melissa's vision. She picked the menu, the dress code, the photo poses. I picked up chairs, washed dishes, took pictures on her phone so she could post them later with captions like, "Family is everything. Ryan, can you not start anything?" Mom would whisper before every gathering, "Your sister works so hard putting this together." I hadn't started a single thing. But the message was clear, my job was to stay out of the way. So I did. For years, I became an expert at letting it go, at saying, "It's fine," when it wasn't. At swallowing my hurt so the night stayed pretty in Melissa's pictures. Right up until the evening I walked into that glass-walled dining room, my son behind me, and realized she'd finally done it. She hadn't just pulled the chair out from under me. This time, she'd yanked it out from under Caleb, too. Part of being the easy child is that everyone assumes you'll stay easy forever. No one stops to ask what happens when the quiet kid grows up, gets divorced, and has a kid of his own to protect. I never planned on being a single dad. Caleb was 6 when Emily and I split. No screaming matches, no cheating scandal. Just two people who'd been walking in different directions for too long. "I love you," she'd said, sitting across from me at our worn-out kitchen table, fingers tracing the grain of the wood. "But I don't want this life. Not here, not in this town, not with this version of us." She moved out a month later for a job 3 states away. We agreed Caleb would stay with me during the school year and visit her on breaks. On paper, it sounded sensible. In real life, it was me packing lunches at 6 a.m., Googling how to get pen ink out of khakis, and pretending I wasn't terrified I would mess everything up. Caleb made it easier than I deserved. He's the kind of kid who thanks the bus driver without being told, who holds doors for strangers, who says, "Wise, ma'am," and "No, sir," in a way that even melts waitresses who've been on a double shift. When he turned 12, he wrote me a card that said, "Thanks for always trying, Dad." Not for being perfect, for trying. I think that's why the text from Melissa stung the way it did. Before she hit send, I'd almost convinced myself we were better. Not close, not equal, but stable. She'd softened a little after Dad died. Or maybe she'd just gotten better at hiding the barbs. The message came on a Thursday afternoon while I was pushing through tickets at work. "Melissa, hey! We're doing something special downtown for Lily's birthday on Saturday. Nothing too fancy, but they have a dress code, family only, 7 p.m. sharp. You and Caleb should come. No question mark. No if you're free." Just a statement, like an announcement on a bulletin board. I stared at it for a full minute. At the bottom of the screen, I could see our older messages. A random meme she'd sent. A photo of the twins holding up honor roll certificates. A short thread from 6 months ago where she'd forgotten to tell me about a family barbecue until the day after. "Oops, thought I texted you. We missed you, right? You okay?" My coworker Sam asked, rolling his chair over. "You look like you just got a bill you weren't expecting." "And away," I said, locking my phone. "My sister invited me to dinner." "Ove," he winced. Sam had heard enough stories to know that wasn't necessarily good news. "You going?" "I guess." I sighed. She said family only. Caleb will want to see his cousins. And that was the problem, really. It wasn't about seeing Melissa. It was about Caleb. He loved his cousins. He liked Lily, even when she bossed him around. He liked being part of something that looked like a big family, even if I knew half of it was staged for Instagram. That night, I told him over spaghetti, "Hey, bud, Aunt Melissa's doing a birthday dinner for Lily on Saturday, downtown, big restaurant." His eyes lit up instantly. "Like a fancy one?" "Yeah." I twirled my fork around a clump of noodles. She said there's a dress code, so we'd have to look presentable. "Can I wear my button up? The blue one. The one you said makes me look dangerously handsome?" he asked, grinning. I laughed. Dangerously handsome might be overselling it, but yeah, we can do that. "Will there be cake?" he asked. "Like one of those big ones with sparklers." "With your aunt," I said. "I'd say that's a safe bet." He nodded satisfied and went back to devouring his dinner. I watched him for a second, feeling that familiar pinch in my chest, hope and dread braided together. After he went to bed, I pulled up my bank app. The number staring back at me was fine. Not great. Not "we can do steak without thinking about it" money. Between the mortgage, the car, Caleb's soccer fees, and the random emergencies that love to drop in uninvited. Braces, the water heater, my ancient laptop giving its last wheeze. I didn't exactly have a fine dining budget category. Still, I found myself at the mall Friday evening, thumbing through racks of shirts. The one Caleb liked, charcoal gray, soft fabric, just structured enough to make him look older than 12, was on sale. I bought it, and a simple navy blazer for myself that cost more than it should have but less than the shame of showing up in the same old wrinkled button-up I wore to every nice event. At the register, the cashier smiled. "Big night." "Something like that," I said. Saturday, we both stood in front of the mirror by the front door, inspecting ourselves. "How do I look?" Caleb asked, smoothing his collar. "Like someone who's about to outshine everyone else in the room." I said honestly. He snorted. You're just saying that because we match. We kind of did. Him in his charcoal shirt, me in my navy blazer and the least scuffed boots I owned. We looked put together, like a father and son who belonged anywhere they walked into. On the drive downtown, Caleb pressed his nose to the window, watching the city lights flicker by. "Do you think Aunt Melissa will let us sit near the cake?" he asked. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. "I don't see why not," I said. "We're family, right?" He smiled at that. Simple. Trusting. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last time I said, "We're family," about my sister and believed it even halfway. By the time we hit downtown, the sun was melting into the buildings and the Saturday crowd had flooded the sidewalks. Caleb leaned forward in his seat as we turned into the parking garage, eyes wide. "Whoa," he whispered. "This place looks like one of those restaurants from the cooking shows." I smiled even as I watched the clock on the dash tick from 6:56 to 7:02. "You ready to be the classiest 12-year-old in the room?" he grinned. I was born ready. Traffic around the block had been a mess. A stalled truck, a light that cycled red 3 times without letting our lane move, the usual city nonsense. By the time we'd parked, jogged up the stairs, and pushed through the heavy glass doors of the restaurant, it was 7:06. Inside, the air smelled like butter and wine and money. Soft jazz floated above the low hum of conversation. A hostess in a black dress gave us the polished smile people reserve for guests they're not sure can afford the menu. "Hi, welcome," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yeah," I said, adjusting my blazer. It should be under Reynolds. My sister Melissa Reynolds. Private room for a birthday dinner. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Of course, they're already here. Right this way." Caleb glanced up at me, then around at the chandeliers, the waiters in crisp shirts. "This is so cool," he murmured. We followed the hostess down a hallway lined with framed black and white photos, past couples hunched over wine glasses and groups laughing around candlelit tables. At the end, she stopped at a set of glass double doors. Through them, I could see Melissa's silhouette at the head of a long table, hair perfect, back straight. Brad lounged beside her, one arm thrown over the back of his chair like he owned the place. A cluster of kids sat at the far end, paper crowns askew, faces lit by the glow of tiny votive candles. The room was gorgeous glass on 3 sides, city lights bleeding in, a long table dressed in white linen. At each place setting folded napkins, polished silverware, stemmed glasses and small, printed place cards. The hostess opened the door. "Here we are," she said quietly. Conversation inside dipped but didn't fully stop. Melissa turned her head, saw us, and widened her eyes in a performance of surprise she'd clearly rehearsed. "Oh," she exclaimed, hand flying to her chest. "Ryan, there you are!" For a half second I relaxed. Maybe I'd been too cynical. Maybe this would be. Then my gaze swept the table. Lyle Lai, at the head beside Melissa.
Yeah, just, yeah, Monday.
2 more couples I vaguely recognized from Facebook photos, friends of Melissa's. Every chair had a name. None of them said RAM. None of them said Kelb. I actually blinked like I'd misread. I checked again, moving my eyes slower this time, stomach going cold, nothing. Caleb shifted behind me, the toe of his dress shoe nudging the back of my heel. I could feel his question without hearing it. Melissa's smile tightened just enough to be noticeable. "You guys look great," she said. "Love the jacket." "Thanks," I managed. The hostess glanced at the table, then at me, a faint crease appearing between her brows. "Is everyone here?" she asked Melissa politely. "Yes," Melissa chirped. "This is everyone for the reservation." The hostess hesitated. "We have you down for 10, Ms. Reynolds." "I see 10 seats." Melissa nodded, still smiling. "Right, 10. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. Brad leaned back in his chair, swirling the red in his glass like he was in a commercial. I cleared my throat. "There's room for 2 more chairs," I said, keeping my voice even. "We can squeeze. We don't need place cards." Melissa tilted her head, mouth forming a small, sympathetic, "Oh, Rye," she said, using the nickname only she and Mom ever used. "I thought you weren't coming." My jaw clenched. "You invited me. You never replied." She countered lightly. "I texted Mom earlier and said we'd go ahead and finalize the head count with the restaurant. The private room only seats 10. They were very strict about it." I was at work, I said. I saw your text. I showed up at 7. That's pretty normal for an invitation. Brad chuckled into his wine, low and lazy. You really should have called ahead, man, he said. Downtown on a Saturday. These places don't just pull extra chairs out of thin air. I looked at him. I didn't think I needed to call ahead to my own family's dinner. He shrugged, all fox, relaxed. Hey, I'm just saying, if you really wanted to make sure you had seats, you would have confirmed. That's how it works. Right, babe? Melissa gave a tiny laugh, eyes flicking to the other adults at the table as if to pull them into the joke. Brad's obsessed with RSVPs, she said. He's right, though. They capped us at 10. I literally begged the manager. She hadn't, I knew that in my bones. Behind me, Caleb's voice was a small whisper. It's okay, Dad. We can just sit somewhere else. He tried to make it sound like an adventure, but the crack in his tone gave him away. My ears burned. Heat crawled up the back of my neck. Every instinct screamed at me to say something sharp, to call her out in front of everyone. You invited us. You knew we were coming. You planned this. But I saw Lily watching, confused. I saw Mom staring down at her napkin like it had the answer written on it. I saw Caleb's reflection in the glass wall, his shoulders drawn in, trying to shrink. I swallowed it. Right, I said, forcing my voice steady. Wouldn't want to mess up your head count. Melissa's smile flickered just a hair. She'd expected a fuss. She'd prepared for it, probably even practiced lines in the mirror about how I was overreacting. I didn't give her the performance. Enjoy dinner, I said. Happy birthday, Lily. My niece gave a small, uncertain wave. Thanks, Uncle Ryan. I turned, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder, steering him gently back toward the door. The hostess stepped aside, looking more flustered now than either my sister or her husband. Once we were in the hallway, the door closing softly behind us, she cleared her throat. I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't realize. It's not your fault, I said. My voice sounded oddly calm in my own ears. Is there any chance you have a table for two somewhere? Doesn't have to be fancy. Just somewhere we can sit down. Her eyes darted toward the main dining room, then to a man in a suit near the bar, silver hair, straight posture, the kind of presence that said manager. Let me check with Mr. Harris, she said. Give me just a minute. Caleb looked up at me, brown eyes serious behind his glasses. Are you mad? He asked quietly. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I said, but not at you. Never at you. He nodded, then tried on a tiny smile. Do you think we can still get dessert? I looked past him at the man the hostess was walking toward, watched the manager's expression shift from neutral to concerned as she murmured something in his ear. I have a feeling, I said, that tonight's going to go a little differently than your aunt planned. The man in the suit walked over like he had all the time in the world, but his eyes told a different story, sharp, assessing, already taking in details. I'm Harris, he said, offering his hand to me first, then to Caleb. I'm the floor manager. My hostess says there's been a hiccup with your party. Hiccup, I repeated, and almost laughed. That was one word for it. He waited. Not impatient, just open. It disarmed me more than any apology could have. My sister booked that private room, I said. She texted me the date and time, told us to come. When we arrived, she'd only reserved 10 seats. There are 10 names on the place cards. None of them are ours. His gaze moved briefly toward the glass doors, where Melissa's laughter floated out like perfume. Then back to me. So you were invited, he clarified, but not accommodated. That's one way to put it, I said. My son was pretty excited to celebrate his cousin's birthday. I'd rather not make a scene in front of them, so if you have anything for two, we'll take it. Doesn't have to be special. Just a table and a couple of chairs would be nice. Caleb stood very still beside me, like if he moved, something would crack. Mr. Harris studied him for a moment. What's your name, young man? Caleb, he said, voice small but clear. Well, Caleb, the manager said, with a smile that actually reached his eyes, I think we can do better than doesn't have to be special. If you'll give Moo, he checked his watch, 5 to 10 minutes, I'll see what I can arrange. In the meantime, can I get you both a soda on the house? Caleb's eyebrows went up. He glanced at me, seeking permission. "That'd be great," I said. "Thank you." We waited near the bar, off to the side, watching servers weave between tables like choreography. 2 Cokes appeared almost immediately, condensation beating on the glasses. Caleb held his close, cupping it with both hands like a mug of something warm instead of cold. Through the glass wall, I could see Melissa's table. From this angle, it looked like a magazine spread, the right outfits, the right lighting, the right smiles. Melissa glanced over once, saw us standing there, and quickly looked away. Why didn't she just add 2 more chairs? Caleb asked quietly, staring at the bubbles in his drink. Because she didn't want us there. I didn't say it. Not like that. Some people, I said instead, like rules that only they get to make, even if they don't make any sense. He thought about that, lips pressing together. Before he could ask more, Mr. Harris reappeared. "All set," he said. "If you'll follow me." He led us not back toward the crowded main floor, but down another hallway, around a corner I hadn't noticed before. At the end was a smaller room, not fully private, but tucked away in a quieter nook, one side open to the rest of the restaurant, the other facing a wide window with a clear view of the city. In the center sat a rounded booth of dark leather, curved around a polished table already set for 2. Candles flickered in small glass holders. A folded white card rested near one of the plates. I picked it up. "Resar Harais." I was planning to grab a late bite there after the rush, he said, glancing at the card. "But something tells me you 2 need it more than I do tonight." I stared at him. "We can't take your—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "And you will. My server Michael will take good care of you. Order whatever you like. The kitchen's at your disposal." Caleb's eyes were huge. "This is awesome," he breathed. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said. "Really?" He nodded once. "You let me worry about the details. You just enjoy dinner with your son." As he walked away, Michael appeared, all easy smiles and practiced charm, but there was something genuine under it tonight. "Gentlemen," he said, "what can I get you started with? And before you ask, yes, steak is absolutely on the table." Caleb shot me a hopeful look. "For real? For real?" I said. His grin split his face. "Then I want steak, with mashed potatoes, and maybe mac and cheese if that's allowed." Michael chuckled. "I think we can bend the rules for you." "I'll have the same," I added, "and maybe a salad so I can pretend I'm making good choices." As he walked away, I sank back against the leather, exhaling slowly. The tension in my shoulders began to drain, replaced by something sharp and strange, relief braided with humiliation, gratitude twisted around anger. "You okay?" Caleb asked. "I'm okay," I said, and I almost meant it. From our booth, if I leaned just a little, I could see into the private room through the reflection in the glass. Melissa was mid-story, hands animated. Brad's arm draped over the back of her chair. Mom sat near the middle, nodding along, eyes wrinkled in that way that meant she was laughing even if I couldn't hear the sound. Every few minutes, Melissa's gaze would flick toward our direction, quick and tight. She couldn't see our table clearly, but she could see that we were seated, that we weren't at the bar or leaving, that whatever she'd intended as a quiet little power play hadn't ended with us slinking home. Our food came. The steaks were perfect, seared outside, pink inside, juices pooling on the plate. Caleb took his first bite and closed his eyes like he was in a commercial. "This is the best thing I've ever eaten," he announced. "Don't tell the spaghetti," I said. "It'll get jealous." He laughed, the sound washing some of the bitterness out of my chest. Halfway through the meal, Mr. Harris stopped by again. "How's everything tasting?" he asked. "Incredible," I said honestly. "You've officially ruined all other steaks for my son." "Sorry, not sorry," he said. His gaze flicked toward the private room, then back to me. "We'll be doing something a little special for dessert. If that's all right with you." "You really don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I want to." He nodded at Caleb. "He deserves a good memory out of tonight." When he left, Caleb leaned in. "Do you think he's going to bring one of those big cakes, like Aunt Melissa always posts on Instagram?" "Maybe," I said. "Would you like that?" He considered.
Yeah.
"But even if it's just ice cream, this is already way cooler than sitting over there." Same, I said. We'd just finished the last bites of steak when the lights in the main dining room dimmed a fraction. The background music softened. There was a subtle shift in the room, a collective inhale. Caleb sat up straighter. What's happening? Then I saw a server near Melissa's room, pushing out a cart with a towering dessert. Chocolate ice cream, sparklers crackling at the top. Music swelled louder in that section as the staff sang some version of Happy Birthday. The whole restaurant glancing over. That must be for Lily, Caleb said, twisting to see. His expression was a mix of awe and something else I didn't like as much, longing. Melissa lifted a champagne flute toward our general direction, her smile sharp. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew exactly what she was mouthing. You missed out. For the first time that night, I felt something cool slide into place over the hot anger. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Just clarity. Harris's eye across the room where he stood by the bar, watching both tables at once. I raised my hand a little, crooking a finger to beckon him over. Is your pastry chef busy? I asked when he reached us. He arched a brow. That depends on what you have in mind. I nodded toward the private room. How hard would it be to make something like that? I said quietly. Only bigger. His mouth quirked. Bigger. Same idea, I said. Just not for the people who forgot to count us. He studied me for a beat, then looked at Caleb, who was pretending not to eavesdrop with the intensity of a kid who absolutely was. I think we can do that, he said. Give us 10 minutes. As he walked away, Caleb leaned in, eyes shining. Are we getting a volcano cake? He whispered. I smiled, a slow, unfamiliar curl at the corner of my mouth. Something like that, I said. Turns out, we didn't miss out at all. They didn't make us wait long. 10 minutes later, the lights dipped again. Not as much as before, just enough to make every candle seem brighter. The background chatter softened, a murmur rolling through the dining room as people turned their heads, sensing something was about to happen. Caleb sat up so fast his straw squeaked against the bottom of his glass. Dad, he whispered. Dad, is that for us? I followed his gaze. 2 servers were wheeling a cart straight toward our booth. Whatever was on it was tall enough that I couldn't see over the top from where I sat. A 3rd server walked beside them carrying a tray stacked with small dessert plates and spoons. The cart stopped at our table. Up close, I could see it was ridiculous in the best possible way. A mountain of chocolate and vanilla and caramel, sculpted more than plated. Layers of brownie, scoops of ice cream, rivers of hot fudge dripping down the sides. Shards of tempered chocolate jutted out like wings. Someone had gone crazy with gold flecks and strawberries dipped halfway in white chocolate. Around the base, nestled among the whipped cream, tiny sparklers fizzed to life, sending crackles of light into the dim air. The entire restaurant actually gasped, like in a movie. Phones came out, some from nearby tables, some from way across the room. I heard someone at the bar say, "What the hell is that?" Michael, our server, grinned as he balanced the centerpiece onto the cleared space in front of us. Ladies and gentlemen near and far. He announced lightly, loud enough for our corner of the room to hear. We have a very special dessert tonight. My face was already hot, but it went hotter when I read the chocolate plaque nestled on the 2nd tier. T.O.T. Best D8 and T. Barvish. Caleb slapped a hand over his own mouth. Oh my gosh, he mumbled behind his fingers. Dad, that's us. That's literally us. I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound.
Yeah, bud.
I think it is. From the corner of my eye, I caught movement through the glass wall. Melissa's table had gone silent. Every adult was staring. The kids were half standing in their seats trying to see over the centerpiece on their own table. Brad's jaw was actually hanging open. It would have been funny if it wasn't so familiar. That look he got when something happened that wasn't on his script. Lily tugged on Melissa's sleeve, lips forming. Is that for Uncle Ryan? Melissa didn't answer. Her gaze met mine through the reflection. The 2 of us staring at each other without really looking directly. Her expression was tight, polite, the way it got when a neighbor's dog messed up her manicured lawn and she was trying to decide whether to scream or smile. Mr. Harris appeared at my shoulder like he'd stepped straight out of thin air. Everything satisfactory? He asked. I shook my head slowly. You're kidding, right? This is insane. In a good way, I hope, he said. In front of me, Caleb was already reaching for a spoon, practically vibrating in place. Can we? He asked. I nodded. Go for it. He hesitated only long enough for me to snap a quick picture, more for him than for social media, then dug in, scooping up an obscene combination of brownie, ice cream, and whipped cream in one bite. His eyes rolled back dramatically. This is the best day of my life, he said, dead serious. I snorted. You said that when we went to the amusement park. This is tied, he amended through a mouthful. Top 3 at least. Michael set down plates and extra spoons, but honestly, we might as well have just tunneled straight into the thing. It was too big, too messy, too over the top to be tidy about. After a minute, I noticed something odd. We weren't the only ones smiling. As staff passed by, as diners glanced over from their own tables, I caught little looks, soft, approving, a few nods. A couple at a nearby top clinked their glasses subtly in our direction. A woman with a toddler on her hip whispered, "That's so sweet," to her partner. What surprised me wasn't that people were impressed by the dessert. It was that no one seemed to be looking toward the private room anymore. For the first time all night, Melissa's perfect little scene wasn't the center of the universe. Mr. Harris must have followed my gaze, because his own mouth quirked. Funny thing about attention, he said quietly. You think you can control it, but it tends to drift toward where the real story is. I huffed. Tonight's story was supposed to be my niece's birthday, and it probably will be for her, he said. Kids are merciful that way. Grown-ups, on the other hand. He let the sentence trail off. I glanced at the private room again. The sparkler on Lily's cake had already burned out. The staff who'd paraded it in were gone. The door was closed, the people inside sealed back in their bubble. How much do I owe you for this? I asked, gesture taking in the entire chocolate mountain. A smile from him and a good tip for Michael, he said. Dessert's on us, I frowned. Come on. You've already given us your booth. I can at least. You can, he interrupted. Come back sometime when it's not a rescue mission. Bring him for a regular dinner. Let us be part of a good memory you planned, not one you had to salvage. I swallowed. Okay. Deal. He patted the back of my chair once and headed toward the host stand. On the way, another staff member caught his arm and said something under their breath. He listened, smiled, then nodded. A few minutes later, as Caleb and I were both slowing down, because there are only so many bites of sugar and chocolate a human being can endure before their body files a complaint. Michael slid the check presenter onto the edge of the table. I frowned. I thought dessert was on. Dinner's on here, he said quickly, tapping the closed folder. The dessert's not on there. Mr. Harris already comped it. But there was something he thought you might find interesting. That was not the word I was expecting. I opened the folder. Inside wasn't our bill. It was a carbon copy of another check, one with a number at the bottom that made my eyebrows jump up. Minimum room charge of $3,000, subtotal food and beverage as $940,000, room minimum difference applied. Those are $60 highlighted in yellow was a line of text at the top. Private dining room Friday and Saturday, 10-person minimum, $3,000 minimum spend. Non-refundable. I stared at it. He wanted you to know, Michael said softly, that the private room is a flat minimum, whether they fill all the seats or not, whether they order big or not. Some parties hit it easily. Some. He lifted one shoulder. My first instinct was embarrassment, like I'd accidentally peeked at someone else's exam grade. Then something colder slid in beside it. So no matter what they ordered, I said slowly, they were always going to pay at least $3,000. That's right, Michael said. And if they'd invited 2 more people, I added. If they'd added 2 more chairs, wouldn't have changed the minimum, he said. Caleb was licking chocolate off his spoon, half paying attention, half in his own sugar universe. Why'd he show me this? I asked. Michael met my eyes. Because sometimes people think they're saving something, money, pride, face, by cutting somebody out. He thought you might like to know that. At least tonight, math wasn't on their side. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. A short, humorless laugh slipped out. Guess they should have called ahead? I muttered. Michael's lips twitched. Geese so. When we finally pushed ourselves out of the booth, Caleb insisted on carrying the last chocolate, covered strawberry in a napkin, for later, like it was a treasure he'd won. Thank you, he told Michael, unprompted, for everything. This was really awesome. You're welcome, buddy, Michael said. Come back soon. We'll save your seat. On the way out, we passed the glass doors of the private room. Through a crack between the curtains, I caught a snapshot, Melissa gesturing sharply, Brad staring at a slip of paper with his brows drawn together, Mom's hand on her chest like she'd just swallowed something the wrong way. Melissa's eyes lifted, just for a second, and met mine. I didn't smirk. I didn't nod. I didn't do anything really, except hold her gaze for one beat longer than I ever had before. Then I turned away. Minutes later, we were back in my car, the city shrinking in the rearview mirror, Caleb chattering about molten chocolate and gold sprinkles as if nothing bad had happened at all. And for the first time, the satisfaction of watching Melissa's perfect night crack around the edges didn't feel as clean as I thought it would. It felt complicated. By the time we pulled into our driveway and Caleb's words had trailed off into tired hums, the sugar high draining out of him, the question started to creep in at the edges of my mind, unwelcome but insistent. Had I finally stood up for myself, or had I just learned a more sophisticated way to get even? Sleep didn't come easy that night. After we got home, Caleb stumbled through his bedtime routine on autopilot, the sugar crash hitting him hard. He brushed his teeth, mumbled something about best dessert ever, and practically face planted onto his pillow. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, watching his shoulders rise and fall. The new shirt hung over his desk chair, a faint smear of chocolate on the cuff. He tried to wipe it off with a wet paper towel in the restaurant bathroom, worried I'd be mad. I hadn't been. I'd laughed, actually. It's proof you had a good time, I told him. Now, in the quiet of his room, the words echoed back at me, less simple than they'd sounded. Had he? Had I? I closed his door most of the way and padded down the hall to my own room. I undid my tie, tossed it onto the dresser, and caught sight of myself in the mirror. Blazer still on, hair slightly mussed. Eyes wired and tired all at once. I looked like someone who just won an argument no one knew was happening. The question I'd been dodging since we left the restaurant pushed forward. Had I finally stood up for myself, or had I just learned a more sophisticated way to get even? I sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on my knees, head in my hands. Images flashed in my mind like a slideshow. I couldn't turn off Caleb's face when he saw there was no seat for him. Melissa's champagne smile, Brad's smirk, the mountain of dessert with our names on it, the highlighted line on that check, minimum spend of 3,000. I wanted to say the satisfaction I'd felt seeing that number, knowing their little exclusion had cost them extra, was pure, clean, justice-flavored. But if I was honest, there'd been something else in there too. Darker. The same part of me that, as a kid, had imagined tripping Melissa on her way up to accept yet another award, just to see her perfect veneer crack. You're not weak because you don't like to fight, Dad had said once. Just make sure you're not picking none. I wondered what he'd think of tonight, if pointing the manager's kindness at my sister like a mirror counted as picking a battle, or just picking a fancier weapon. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, jerking me out of the spiral. I grabbed it, half expecting some dramatic text from Melissa. Nothing, just an email from work and a notification from the bank about a scheduled payment. Of course she hadn't texted. That would have required acknowledging any part of what had happened was her responsibility. I silenced my phone, lay back on the bed fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling until sometime past 2 a.m., when my body finally overruled my buzzing brain and dragged me under. The next morning, I woke to the smell of toast and the sound of cabinets opening and closing more loudly than necessary. Caleb was in the kitchen, hair sticking up, butter knife in hand. Morning, I mumbled. Hey, he said, around a mouthful of toast. I made you some. It's a little crispy. The slice on my plate was more charcoal than golden brown. It's perfect, I said and took a bite. It tasted like burned bread and effort. I'd had worse. He watched me for a second, like he was trying to read my mood. Are you mad at Aunt Melissa? He asked finally. Kids have no interest in detours. I'm not happy with what she did, I said carefully. But I'm not going to spend all day being mad. That just lets her live rent free in my head. He nodded slowly, though I could tell he wasn't done thinking about it. She could have let us sit there, he said. There was room. And the guy said the money was the same. I blinked. You heard that? He shrugged. I was right next to you when he told you about the minimum thing. I'm 12, not deaf. Fair point, I said. He chewed his lip. Did we? I don't know. Did we do something wrong? That hit harder than anything his aunt had done. No, I said, more firmly than I meant to. We showed up where we were invited. We were on time. We dressed nice. We didn't do anything wrong. He relaxed a little at that, like he'd been waiting to see if maybe somehow all of this was his fault. Okay, he said. Can we not talk about it anymore? Deal, I said. At least until my mom calls. He frowned. Grandma's gonna call? Oh, definitely. I sighed. Your Aunt Melissa is probably already telling her how awkward it was when I made a big deal out of nothing. What? She's the one who? I know, I said. And you know. That's enough for now. He finished his toast, rinsed his plate, and shuffled off to the living room to lose himself in some video game where problems were solved with clear objectives and respawn buttons. I waited. It didn't take long. Around noon, my phone lit up with Mom. I stared at it for a few rings, steeling myself, then answered. Hey, I said. Ryan, she breathed, drawing my name out like it weighed something. I was going to call earlier, but I didn't want to wake you if you'd been out late. Not that late, I said. What's up? I heard, she began, then paused, apparently deciding how to phrase it. I heard things got a little awkward last night. There it was, the word. The universal family code for something terrible happened, but we're going to pretend it was just mildly uncomfortable. Awkward, I repeated. Is that what we're calling it? She sighed. Melissa told me you were upset because there weren't seats for you and Caleb. Melissa forgot to reserve enough chairs for the people she invited. I said, that's not a seating chart problem, Mom. That's a BA decent human problem. I'm sure she didn't forget. Mom said quickly. You know how stressed she gets when she's planning these events. The private room only seats so many, and she had to think about Lily's friends and the parents and. She texted me family only. I cut in. Last I checked, Caleb and I are family. Silence crackled on the line. I'm not saying she handled it perfectly. Mom said eventually. I'm just saying, maybe you should have communicated better. She said you never confirmed you were coming. I stared at the far wall, jaw tightening. So if someone invites me to something and I show up at the time they said, that's my poor communication, I asked. I'm just saying, if you'd called ahead. There it is, I said, letting out a short, humorless laugh. The magic phrase. What? She asked. If you'd called ahead, I repeated. Funny. That's exactly what Brad said while my son was standing there without a place to sit. Ryan, she said, voice dipping into that tone she used when I was 12 and raising my voice. There's no need to be sarcastic. There is when I'm being told this is my fault, I said. Again, I'm not blaming you, she protested. I'm just trying to see it from both sides. Melissa puts a lot of effort into these things. She wants everything to be nice. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want to come. You haven't always. She didn't think, Mom. I snapped, sharper than I meant. Or if she did, she thought I was optional. Like an extra chair they could add if they had room. The line went quiet for a beat. Well, she said at last, brittle. Maybe we should all just take some time to cool off. Maybe we should. I agreed. We hung up a minute later, conversation petering out in a mess of, I love yous. That didn't fix anything. I set the phone down and stared at it, feeling that familiar hollow open up in my chest. Not the clean ache of hurt, but the dull, heavy weight of being unseen in the exact same way, over and over again. It wasn't just last night. It was every Christmas photo where I'd been shoved to the edge of the frame. Every graduation party where Melissa's achievements were a toast and mine were an afterthought. Every time Mom had said, you know how your sister is, as if that were a law of physics and not a choice. I'd spent nearly 4 decades twisting myself into shapes that fit around Melissa's wants and Mom's comfort zones. It was hard not to wonder if, somewhere along the way, I'd put down so many pieces of myself that there wasn't much left to stand up with. I wandered into the small spare room I called an office. Desk, old computer, shelves with mismatched binders. In the closet, behind a stack of junk I kept telling myself I'd sort someday, something tugged at my memory. On autopilot, I pulled the boxes aside. There, covered in a thin layer of dust, was a large flat portfolio and a spiral-bound sketch pad with a cracked spine. I dragged them out, sat cross-legged on the floor, and opened the pad. Lines stared back, a version of me from another life. Sketches of comic book heroes I'd invented at 16. Quick portraits of classmates who'd never known they'd been studied. Half-finished cityscapes, hands, eyes, little pieces of a world I'd almost belonged to. I had stopped drawing around the time Caleb was born, not all at once. First it became, I'll get back to it when he's sleeping more. Then, when work settles down. Then, when things are less crazy with the mortgage. Eventually when, dried up and ever, took its place. Now flipping through page after page, the part of me that had gone quiet for so long stirred. Without really thinking, I grabbed a pencil from the desk and pulled a fresh page forward. My hand felt clumsy at first. Lines went where I didn't intend. The paper resisted. But after a few minutes, the old rhythm returned. Not perfect, not smooth, but familiar enough that my muscles remembered what my brain had forgotten. I didn't draw Melissa or Brad or my mother. I drew Caleb, hunched over a restaurant table, eyes bright, spoon raised, oblivious to the storm around him. Then I drew the chocolate mountain, exaggerated and towering, sparklers shooting out like fireworks. When I was done, I snapped a picture of it with my phone. On impulse, I opened an app I hadn't thought about in years, Reddit, and found a small community for amateur illustrators. I made a throwaway username, posted the drawing with a simple caption, "Sketch from last night, took my kid out for dessert after a family event went sideways. Trying to get back into drawing after a decade. Be gentle." I tossed the phone onto the bed and went to make coffee, telling myself I didn't care if anyone responded. 20 minutes later, curiosity won. I checked. There were comments, not thousands, not viral, but enough to make my chest do something strange. "This is awesome. Love the composition. The expression on the kid's face is perfect. You can tell he's in his own world. If this is you, Rusty, I'd kill to see you warmed up." One person had DM'd me, asking if I ever did commissions. Nothing huge, just a portrait of my dog in this style. I stared at the message for a full minute, then actually laughed. Of all the timelines, I muttered. That night, after Caleb went to bed, I drew again. Not for money, not yet, just because it felt like breathing in a room I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath in. I made it a habit, an hour or two every evening. Pencil smudges returning to the side of my hand, the desk slowly filling with paper. I didn't post everything, but enough that my little anonymous account grew a handful of followers. A few more people asked if I'd draw their pets, their D&D characters, a book cover. It wasn't a career, not even close. But it was mine, and as the days passed, the anger toward Melissa cooled from a boil to a simmer, then to something else entirely, not forgiveness, not yet, but a resolve that didn't depend on her. I didn't need her to validate me. I didn't need my mother to pick a side. I didn't even need the universe to even the score. What I needed was to stop showing up to be the extra chair in someone else's story. Which is why, 2 weeks later, when my phone buzzed with a text from Melissa, I didn't immediately feel my stomach drop. "Melissa, hey, we should probably talk. Mom's birthday is coming up. I booked a table at Harris for a small family dinner. Just us, no friends. I'd like you and Caleb to be there." Underneath, as if she'd forced herself to type it, and then sat on her hands before she could delete it. "I'll make sure there are enough chairs this time." I stared at the screen, a dozen feelings rushing through at once. Irritation at the half-joke, the implication that all of this had been a misunderstanding, curiosity about what "just us" meant, a flicker of something that might have once been hope if I'd still believed she was capable of a real apology. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I scrolled up to Dad's old contact in my phone. Still there. Of course, even though he'd been gone for years, and then further to a different number, one I hadn't used since the estate had been settled. The lawyers. There were things Melissa didn't know about Dad's will. Things she'd never bother reading the fine print of, because she'd always assumed the story ended with her on top. Maybe it was time I stopped assuming anything. I opened a new text, this one to a different person entirely. Hey, weird question. Do you remember that night at the restaurant? How would you feel about going back? Only this time as my date. I hit send and sat back, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth as I waited for Chloe's 3 dots to appear. Chloe didn't even hesitate. A few seconds after I sent the text, the 3 dots popped up. Chloe, the restaurant where your sister forgot you exist. I'm in. What should I wear to a family ambush? I laughed out loud, the sound startling in my quiet kitchen. Something that makes you feel like you don't owe anyone an apology. Chloe, sew anything in my closet. Text me the time. And Ryan, I've got your back. For the first time since the night of the dessert, the knot between my shoulders loosened. The week crawled. In between work tickets and Caleb's homework, I emailed Dad's old lawyer, dug out PDFs I'd skimmed once and never fully absorbed, and had a very interesting phone call about words like guarantor, collateral, and right to withdraw consent. Turned out my signature carried more weight than I'd realized. Your father was very intentional, the lawyer said carefully. He wanted you to have leverage, if you ever needed it. Leverage, I repeated. Feels more like a landmine. Sometimes, he replied. Those are the same thing, depending on who steps where. By Friday, the papers were printed, folded into a clean white envelope, and sitting on my kitchen counter like a quiet dare. The dinner was Saturday at 7, again. This time, we weren't late. Caleb had opted out, and I hadn't fought him on it. When I'd told him there was another dinner at Harris, just family, he'd wrinkled his nose. Can I sit this one out? He'd ask. I don't want to be the brave kid again. You don't have to be, I said. Not this time. So he stayed with my neighbor, who had a teenage son and a living room full of video game consoles. It was the most relaxed I'd seen him all week. You sure you're okay going into this without him? Chloe asked as we parked. No, I said honestly. But I think I'm finally okay going into something for myself. She smiled, reached over, and squeezed my hand. Good, she said. Because I brought lipstick that says I mean business. Inside, the host recognized me. His eyebrows lifted, just a fraction, when I gave my name. Ems Reynolds' party, he asked. I said, small family dinner, that's what she said. He nodded, flicked a glance toward the back. Mr. Harris asked me to send you his way before I take you in, if you don't mind. Chloe arched a brow at me. You have a fan club. I have a very specific demographic, I said. Middle-aged restaurant managers who hate bad behavior. We found Harris near the bar, scanning the floor with the subtle intensity of someone who could tell you the status of every table without looking directly at any of them. Ryan, he greeted. Good to see you again. You must be Chloe. She shook his hand like she'd been doing this her whole life. He tells me you make an excellent save. I try to keep the damage minimal, Harris said. I wanted to make sure you were actually on the reservation this time. Am I? I asked. You are, he said. 6 people total. You, your mother, your sister, her husband, and the twins. No friends, no extras. She was very clear about that. Clear. Right, he hesitated. I also took the liberty of assigning Michael to your table again. He requested you. Guess we tip well, I said. Guess he likes people who say thank you. Harris countered. Shall we? The private room looked smaller with fewer people in it, but no less staged. Melissa sat near the middle this time instead of at the head, as if that slight shift might sell the illusion of equality. Brad lounged to her right. My mother perched on her left, smoothing her skirt, expression already tight. The twins fiddled with their napkins, clearly bored. When the host opened the door and announced Mr. Ryan Carter and guest, the whole room turned toward us. Ryan, Mom said, standing. Relief and anxiety warred on her face. You made it. I said I would. I replied. Hi, Mom. Melissa's eyes flicked over me first, then landed on Chloe. Her smile reappeared like someone had hit a switch. And you must be, she extended a hand, the picture of grace. I'm Melissa? Chloe said, taking it. Nice to finally meet the sister I've heard so much about. It was the kind of sentence that could be either compliment or threat, depending on how you heard it. Melissa's eyes narrowed for half a second, then smoothed. Well, I wish I'd known you were bringing someone, she said breezily. We could've. You did. I cut in. I texted you yesterday. Her gaze snapped to mine. You said, and I quote, I won't be coming alone. That isn't exactly a confirmation. Melissa, Mom hissed under her breath. Be nice. It's fine, I said, even though we all knew it wasn't. There are 6 chairs and 6 people. Looks like the math worked out this time. Brad poured himself more wine. Let's just enjoy dinner, he said. No need to rehash the past. Which, translated from Brad East, meant no need to talk about anything that makes us look bad. We took our seats, Chloe and I across from Melissa and Brad, Mom at the head between us, the twins at the other end like a buffer. Michael appeared to take drink orders, eyes crinkling when he recognized me. Good evening, he said, voice perfectly neutral. Only the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth betrayed anything like amusement. We were told this was a small family dinner, Melissa said, as if she were clarifying the rules of engagement. Just us. No drama.
No drama, I echoed. Got it.
For the first half hour, conversation tiptoed around landmines. Mom asked Chloe about her work. Chloe explained she was a graphic designer, freelancing for small businesses and authors. So that's how you two met? Mom asked. Through art? Through a mutual love of making things that actually exist? Chloe said lightly. Ryan mentioned he used to draw. He's underselling himself. Melissa's eyes flicked to me. You're drawing again. A bit, I said. It started as stress relief, turned into something more. Is it serious? She asked, a note I recognized. Half genuine interest, half measuring. Serious enough that people are paying him, Chloe said. He did a book cover last month that turned out gorgeous. That's wonderful, Mom said, sincere. Your dad would have liked that. Would he? Melissa said, too quickly. He always told me art wasn't practical. Dad told you a lot of things, I said. He told me not to disappear. I just took longer than he'd hoped to listen. The air grew heavier. Melissa reached for her wine again. Brad cleared his throat. So, he said, turning to me, heard you made quite an impression here last time. That dessert was something. There it was. I could see the line he was setting up, the narrative he wanted to steer us back into. Guy makes a scene over nothing, embarrasses the family. Overacts. I agreed. Caleb loved it. Yeah, well, Brad said, forcing a chuckle. Lily was pretty upset, you know. She felt like you were trying to upstage her birthday. I stared at him. I took my son out for dessert after realizing there wasn't a single chair for him at his cousin's table. I said, if Lily was upset, that's on the adults who decided head counts mattered more than people. Melissa set her glass down a little too hard. We invited you, she said. You never confirmed. We had to commit to a number. You keep saying that. I cut in quietly. Like if you say it enough times, it'll become true. Mom reached for her napkin, fingers worrying the edge. Maybe we should talk about something else. No, I said, surprising even myself with the firmness in my voice. You asked me here. You said you wanted to talk. So let's actually talk. My heart thudded. Chloe's knee bumped mine under the table, steady and warm. For years, I began, voice surprisingly level, I have let things go. I let it go when Melissa forgot to tell me about family cookouts. I let it go when Caleb's name was left off Christmas cards. I let it go when my own achievements were reduced to jokes at the table because they didn't come with honor rolls or Instagram posts. Ryan. Mom started. I held up a hand, not rude but firm. Please, just let me finish. The twins had gone silent. Even they understood something real was happening. Last month, I went on. My son and I walked into a room where we had been invited and discovered there was literally no place for us. Not metaphorically. Literally. No chairs. No names. And instead of anyone saying, we're sorry, we messed up, I was told by my brother-in-law and then again by my mother, that if I just called ahead, if I just communicated better, If I'd just done more, it wouldn't have happened. Melissa's cheeks were flushed now. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Am I? I asked, because I keep replaying Caleb's face in that doorway, and it feels pretty proportionate. Brad scoffed. Every family has miscommunications. You didn't have to parade around with that dessert like some kind of martyr. People noticed, you know. It was tacky. Tacky. I repeated softly. You know what's tacky? Treating your own family like a backup plan, then getting offended when they stop playing along. The room went very still. For a moment, I thought Mom might get up and walk out. Instead, she slumped back in her chair, looking suddenly tired. Ryan, she said, voice thin. What do you want? That was the question, wasn't it? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the white envelope, the papers inside crisp against my fingers. I want, I said slowly, to stop being the guarantor of everyone else's comfort, and in some cases, their debt. I slid the envelope onto the table in front of Brad. He frowned. What's this? Read it, I said. He opened it, eyes scanning the first page. His casual posture vanished, shoulders jerking upright. What the? He hissed. No, you can't do this. Melissa leaned over. What is it? She demanded, snatching at the papers. Her eyes moved back and forth, faster and faster. Apparently, he thinks he can just pull out of the loan. Brad snapped. The bank'll never. They already did, I said quietly. That's a copy of the notice they sent to you. This is just the courtesy version. You signed on as guarantor, Brad said, voice rising. You can't just change your mind when it's inconvenient. I signed on, I said, because Dad asked me to help you get your feet under you. I signed on when I was told it's no big deal. It's just paperwork. Your family. I signed on when I still believed that word meant we had each other's backs. I held his gaze. But here's the thing, I continued. Being a guarantor isn't just a signature. It's risk. If your business tanks, the bank comes for me, for my house, for Caleb's stability. And I'm not willing to gamble my son's future on people who can't even guarantee him a chair at dinner. Melissa slammed the papers down. This is vindictive, she spat. You're punishing us because you're hurt. Over one mistake. One mistake, Chloe said quietly for the first time, her voice cutting through the room like a clean blade. How many one mistakes add up to a pattern, Melissa? All eyes swung to her. You don't know our family. Melissa snapped. You have no idea. I know what I heard, Chloe said calmly. I know he showed me a screenshot of your text. I know you invited him, then humiliated him in front of his kid. And I know that when he tried to talk about it, you all told him to stop overreacting. Seems like a pretty clear pattern from where I'm sitting. Mom winced, but didn't contradict her. The bank is fine, I said. They had no problem with me withdrawing as long as I followed the process. They'll want you to find another guarantor or adjust the terms. That's between you and them. I'm done being your safety net, financially and otherwise. Brad's face had gone a mottled red. You're going to tank my business over a damn birthday party. No, I said. You're going to figure out your business without leaning on someone you don't respect. There's a difference. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The only sounds were the clink of cutlery from the restaurant outside and the faint buzz of the air conditioning. Finally, Mom broke the silence. Ryan, she said, eyes shiny. Are you cutting us off? I looked at her, really looked past the worry about Melissa, past the instinct to smooth things over. No, I said. I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just done pretending this is normal. I won't show up to be the quiet extra anymore. If I'm invited somewhere, it needs to be because you actually want me there, not because I'm convenient or expected. I turned to Melissa. And if you ever humiliate my son like that again, I added, voice low, there won't be any conversations or warnings. We'll just be done. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. So that's it, she finally whispered. You get your little speech, you pull your money, and you walk away the hero. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm just a guy who took a long time to understand that being kind doesn't mean letting people walk over you, and being family doesn't mean I owe you my silence. The door to the room opened a crack then. breaking the tension. Michael slipped in, pushing a small cart. On it sat a modest dessert, nothing like the spectacle from last time. Just a simple, elegant cake, white frosting, a few raspberries on top. "Apologies," he said softly. I didn't want to interrupt, but the kitchen insisted this come out while the candles are still upright. On top, written in looping chocolate script, were the words HAPPYBRHDY. Lee NDAANTUNEWMNGS. Mom let out a choked laugh that turned halfway into a sob. "Oh," she said, bringing a hand to her mouth. "Oh, that's lovely." I glanced at Harris through the glass. He was standing outside, pretending not to watch. "Will there be anything else?" Michael asked. I met his eyes and shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "I think that just about covers it." For a moment, nobody moved. Mom stared at the cake like it had appeared out of thin air, her fingers trembling around the napkin in her lap. Melissa's eyes were fixed on the words "new beginnings," as if they were personally offensive. Brad still had the papers clenched in his fist. "Blow out the candles, Mom," I said gently. "You don't want the wax to win." She let out a wet little laugh and rose halfway out of her chair. Chloe slid the cake closer. Mom closed her eyes for a second longer than necessary, then blew. The tiny flames went out in a puff of smoke. For a heartbeat, the room smelled like sugar and extinguished wishes. "Make a good one?" I asked. She sat back down, dabbing at her eyes. "I'm working on it," she said. There was an opening there, small, fragile. But I knew better than to try to force it wide in one night. Change in this family, if it happened at all, was going to be slow and uneven. I'd made my piece of it clear. The rest was up to them. I pushed my chair back. "Thank you for inviting me,"
I told Mom.
"and for the cake." "It's more than we usually say." She nodded, throat tight. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. I looked at Melissa and Brad. They said nothing. That used to gut me. Now, it just informed my decisions. "I'm going to head out," I said. "I told Caleb I wouldn't be too late." "You're leaving already?" Melissa asked, incredulous. "We just got dessert." I said what I needed to say. I replied, "You heard me. That's more than we've managed in years. I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's fine, just because there's frosting on the table." Chloe stood too, smoothing her dress. "It was nice meeting you all," she said, polite but not apologetic. Brad muttered something under his breath about drama. For once, I didn't ask him to repeat it. Outside the room, the restaurant felt brighter, somehow. Less like a stage, more like a place where people were just eating dinner, living their lives. Harris caught my eye as we passed the host's stand. I lifted 2 fingers in a small salute. He didn't say anything, just dipped his chin in a tiny nod that said enough. In the car, Chloe waited until we were a block away before she spoke. "You okay?" she asked. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Yeah," I said. "Weirdly, yeah. That was a lot," she said. "You handled it?" "I handled it late," I said. "But I handled it." She smiled. "Timing's overrated. You drew a line. You didn't burn the entire house down. That's more than some people manage in a lifetime." Streetlights slid across the windshield, painting her face in flickers of gold. My hands on the wheel felt steady, not white-knuckled. I spent a long time thinking keeping the peace was the same thing as loving my family, I said. "I don't think that's true anymore." "What do you think it is?" she asked. "Love." I glanced at her, then back at the road. "I think it's telling the truth, even when everyone would rather you stay quiet. And I think it's not teaching your kid that he has to earn a chair at someone else's table." We pulled into my driveway. The neighbor's porch light was on. Through their front window, I could see Caleb and their son hunched over controllers, faces lit by the TV. Chloe turned in her seat to face me. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said. "Now I go inside, reclaim my dangerously handsome 12-year-old, and maybe draw something that doesn't involve cake or contracts." She laughed softly. "Sounds like a solid plan." I hesitated, then added, "And as for the rest, they can call if they want, or not. I'm done chasing invitations I was never really meant to accept." Chloe reached over and laced her fingers through mine. "Good," she said. "Because you've got your own table now." I squeezed her hand, then let go and stepped out into the cool night air. when Caleb barreled out of the neighbor's front door a minute later. Backpack slung over one shoulder, he looked up at me with that same open, trusting gaze he'd had in the mirror before the first dinner. "How was it?" he asked. "Did they at least have chairs this time?" "They did," I said. "And I decided how long I wanted to sit in mine." He frowned, parsing that. "Is that good?" "It is," I said. "For us, it is." We walked up the path to our front door, his shoulder bumping my arm, his footsteps matching mine without even trying. They could keep their private rooms and their place cards, and their carefully curated versions of family. I'd finally found my seat. Turns out, it was never really at their table to begin with.